Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the NatiCast. So we wind up our first season of the NatiCast with a special treat. Ron Rex and I are enjoying a break at the holidays with friends and family, but our producer Matthew has come up with a wonderful short episode that he recorded a few years back as a college project. Dave Stull Sr. has been mentioned many times in our first season. And it's not an overstatement to say that none of the people on this podcast would be where they are today without him. Father to my co-host Rex and our guest from Season 1, Dave Jr., grandfather to our producer Matthew, one of the driving forces behind the technical theater department, which sent Ron on his path in life, and he was also my mentor and drama teacher at the School for Creative and Performing Arts. But it's not just us. Mr. Stull, as we all knew him at school, played an outsized role in the lives of so many students he encountered over the years. Teacher, mentor, and father figure, it's hard to quantify the impact he made on the trajectory of lives of so many people. When Dave passed away in 2022, I was asked to speak at his memorial service, which was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Family and friends from across his life gathered at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, and Matthew stitched together recordings he and his grandfather made for 10 years, talking about his life along with live and recorded messages from dozens of people. It was a remarkable thing to witness as 2 hours flew by. We were all simply amazed that Dave not only stayed in contact with students from decades past, but he continued to mentor them, celebrate their successes, and comfort them in sadness. A true celebration of life and a life well lived. All of us here at the NatiCast hope everyone had a happy holiday season and new year. And we look forward to bringing you an exciting lineup of guests as we enter 2025. For now, I will hand it over to Matthew as he talks with his grandfather, Dave Stull Sr., about his early life and start in the business. I must point out how amazing Mr. Stull is on the microphone. In his 80s, telling stories as he so often did to impart wisdom and lessons from his life. Enjoy our chat with Dave Stull Sr.
My name is David Stull, but when I was in broadcasting here in Cincinnati, I used the name David Manning. I think I best tell you all that I'm 83 years old, so I was in broadcasting at Cincinnati back when it was somewhat in its infancy, when television was live. There was no such thing as videotape. It hadn't been invented yet. So it was a lot of fun. Enter in haste and repent at leisure. When you were on the air, you're on the air, and you couldn't go back and fix it
Right.
again.
Not a lot of editing going on back then.
Not a whole lot.
So something I thought would be really interesting, as you worked in the field in a lot of different areas, is there something about the interview process that you remember, a trick that you use to get ahead, or a story that you have that might help people have some insight as to what it's really like to get hired into these fields?
Well, that's hard to transfer any of this to any individual. I can only speak to what happened to me, and it was, to be honest with you, it was very spontaneous. A couple of the jobs that were important to me when I was just starting out in broadcasting. One happened here in Cincinnati when I went over to WKRC. And a guy named Ed Kennedy, who was the program director, and he also did all their sportscasting, interviewed me for a job. And this was when I was, I think, probably a sophomore in college. And I went in and talked with him, and I was interviewing for a job as a summer replacement announcer. And we talked for a while, and toward the end of the interview, Ed turned to me and said, well, he said, listen, he said, let's say I hire you. And at the end of the time that you've been working here, and you're ready to go back to school, and he said, I have an opening, and I offer you a job. What would you do? I said, oh, well, since I'm going to Miami University, I could probably transfer some credits down to University of Cincinnati and, go to school part-time, something like that, because I am really interested in getting in the broadcast business. And he said to me, I thought you'd say that. I'm not going to hire you. You go back to school, you get your degree, and then come see me, and we'll talk. Well, I was a little put off at the time, and I had 2 years to go. But anyhow, I followed the man's advice. I went back to school. I graduated, and right after graduation, I was knocking on his door. I said, hey, you said that you would hire me. And he said, well, I don't have a real opening right now. I'll tell you what, go out and try to find a job. Really try. And if you can't find one, come back. Well, I did, and I couldn't. And so I went back to him. He said, okay, you're hired. And that's how I started in professional radio here in Cincinnati.
And from there it went to television pretty quickly, right?
And, well, it wasn't pretty quickly. I guess it was about a year or so, but there was an opportunity that opened up in Dayton. And I decided I'd go up there and audition for WLWD. Now it's WDTN, but then it was WLWD. And so I went up there to audition for the job, and I was talking with the program director. And he said to me, well, you aren't the kind of a person we're looking for. And there was this kind of dead space in between us for a moment, and I looked at him, and I guess I was somewhat of a smart aleck back in those days, and I said, how do you know? And he sat back at his desk, and he looked at me and said, you mean you don't feel like you've been given a chance? I said, you don't know what I can do. And he said, well, all right. He said, be in here tonight at 8 o'clock. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to do a newscast. I want you to do a sportscast. He said, I want you to do a formalized commercial. I want you to do an ad-lib commercial. And I want you to introduce a movie in an unusual way.
Wow.
See you tonight at 8 o'clock. So I walked out with shaky knees out of his office, and I went upstairs at Channel 2. And it just so happened that a gal I knew from Miami University was working in the traffic department. Traffic being scheduling. And she said to me, he always does that. He never invites the sales department to see somebody to come in here to audition so he can kind of decide on his own. And so she actually made a call to the sales manager and said, a friend of mine is coming in here tonight. And he's going to audition. Could you come in to see? And the guy agreed. So when I came in that night with all of these things that he wanted, the sales department was there. So to make this very long story short, I got hired, and that was my introduction into commercial television. And I worked there at Channel 2 and then moved down to Cincinnati to Channel 5.
He almost was programmed to turn people away pretty much, right?
I think so. I don't know why I wasn't who he was looking for.
Right.
But I guess he had to go along with the sales department, but he did hire me.
Right. And that's something interesting is the fact that, once you had sort of pushed through that door kind of, well, how do you know I'm not what you want? That almost sparked his interest as, oh, well, that's, maybe that is what I'm looking for.
I think it might have been. You always take a chance. So in your interview process, and also I want to point out something, it's also networking is so important in broadcasting or in any kind of career you're going to go into. Mm-hmm. People people you've been friends with or friends who know somebody. That is tremendously important as you move up in especially a competitive business like the broadcast business.
You ended up a long time later teaching here at the University of Cincinnati.
I did. It was actually not the UC then. It was College Conservatory of Music.
Oh, and they were separate back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, the broadcast division of the College Conservatory of Music used professionals to teach. And so I taught, I think about 5 or 6 years at CCM. I taught broadcasting. And a lot of my colleagues in broadcasting also taught here. And so as I explained to Matthew, my grandson, the e-media department is actually, I guess, if you go back to Ancestry.com, you would find it went all the way back to this 83-year-old guy who worked here as a teacher.
More or less, the times have changed and the technology has changed, but the structure of it still, you got professionals teaching the job. They still do that. I think eMedia, better than a lot of majors, brings in people that work in the field, and it's just a really cool place to learn from people that do the job. So
I think it's really important that you learn from people who are working in the field. They can bring something to the table that says, look, this is the real world. And academia is important, but the real world plays a big part in how successful you're going to be.
Well, thank you very much for answering some of my questions. It was really good talking to you.
Thank you, Matthew. Great to be here.
The NatiCast is proudly brought to you by Paco Lago Productions. The show is hosted by Tim Barker, Rex Stull, and Ron Thomas. Produced and edited by Matthew Lake and associate produced by Ethan Spanja. Special thanks to Sadie Kern at Popgun Flow for the graphics and to Brando Triantafilu for the original theme song. Feel free to follow us at _NatiCast on Instagram or head to our website, thenaticast.com. You can get this show wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.